Thanks, Paul, and thank you everyone for joining us today. For this FastCast, we'll be covering how to select the KPIs that matter most for your organization. As Paul mentioned, my name is Courtney Porchella, and I'm the Director of Marketing here at Aware Manager, and I'll serve as the moderator for today. Our presenter is Tommy Gunn. He's the Strategic Advisor for Aware Manager. Before joining our team last year, Tommy served as the Global Head of Real Estate for Philips, and prior to that held positions with DTC and a bunch of other facility management companies. And the goal for today is for him to share kind of his experience and how he has created sets of KPIs for his organizations and to share the lessons he learned along the way. Specifically on the agenda for today, we'll be covering the difference between metrics, KPIs, and SLAs, and the acronyms that we hear so often but don't always cover what the differences are. And then we'll go through how to select the right KPIs for your organization based on the goals that the business has, the goals that your department has, and then how to turn those KPIs into reporting and dashboards that make the most sense for you. We'll conclude by going over some examples of those KPIs, but we'll be leaving plenty of time for questions at the end. As we go through today's presentation, please submit any questions if you do have them by typing them into the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And just be sure to send your questions to all panelists. And then we'll answer as many as time permits, and if there are any questions that we don't get to, we'll make sure to send you answers offline after the conclusion of today's presentation. Now I'll turn it over to Tommy, and he'll walk us through today's presentation. And again, any questions that you have, please enter those into the Q&A panel. Over to you, Tommy.
Good morning, and thank you everyone for joining today's FastCast. I thought today a good way to start off would be to go through some of the acronyms that we use in the industry and then give a couple of very specific examples of how they interact with each other. As you can see on the screen, essentially my interpretation is that all metrics are not KPIs. KPIs, or key performance indicators, are those metrics that display the contribution a department or organization makes towards the mission of the company. And it's really a KPI is the fundamental metric of an organization or department in different categories or areas. These are aligned with the values and the vision, again, of the company or the department. KPIs define the topmost level of success. They provide a story or a map of the organization's overall performance. And where they start is with the service level agreement. I'm going to walk through a couple of examples now that will show how those metrics are derived or extracted from the service level agreement and how they roll up or cascade up to a key performance indicator. And I should mention that of late I have noticed that there is actually a new acronym in the industry, and it's called a super KPI. I learned this at an event in New York City some weeks ago, and a super KPI was on a full service account where there were a number of key KPIs that rolled up to a single indicator of an organization's performance. So the first example I'm going to go through has to do with on-time performance. We all know that work orders are a key item or deliverable of a real estate facilities organization. And starting at the top, a KPI in this example is on-time work order completion. Now that work order completion, as it cascades down, is derived as a percentage of the total number of work orders that are in the system and that were completed on time. In my example, there'll be 4 priorities and a 5th priority for PMs or preventative maintenance work orders. So in this example, the 4 key priorities, P1 through P4, each have their own on-time delivery goal, and that is derived directly from the service level agreement that the organization agrees to perform at a specific level. A 5th area is the on-time delivery of preventative maintenance work orders. Essentially, those roll up into a single number in this example of on-time completion, and they're weighted based on the importance. Some examples I have seen show that a KPI in total might be the KPIs for P3, 4, and PMs are 1, and there is a separate KPI for P1s and P2s given their level of criticality. And these can be broken down further by building. by skilled, unskilled trade, and then with the specific areas within those trades, plumbers, electricians, general maintenance, cleaning. So my second example, this particular one, and I should just step back and mention that in that example, that would be in the area of operational performance. We'll touch on the 5 areas that I target. The second example can fall into operational, but more normally falls into financial, and this is productive labor. In this particular example, productive labor would be the key performance indicator, would be that percentage of hours that were used in a particular time frame that were considered productive. Also, the measurement includes non-productive time and overtime. But again, those cascade down into separate metrics. Those metrics are skilled, non-skilled, and then in the specific trades. Skilled area may have the number of productive hours in the plumbing department, the electrician department, HVAC, etc. And what this helps do, especially when we drill down even further to the specific work order perspective, an organization can take a look at, the PMs that were completed on time. They can take a look at the average completed time against a standard, and it helps an organization determine if the organization is performing at their goal and objective. So next, I'm going to touch on designing the right metrics and KPIs. As you see here, when we start, what we take a look at first is, what is the mission and the goal of the organization? And that's in total of a company. And that's immaterial if you're part of the company or you're an outside provider to a company. Then we drill it down and take a look at the specific departments within the real estate organization. And then what is important to the organization and how that all fits in. So KPIs, the most important performance indicators with which the organization would not fill its mission. What is important to the real estate department? And in this, when you start to take a look at the design, what is the key area of focus? Is it financial, customer service, downtime, uptime, productivity, safety, environmental compliance? And it really does start with the company's strategic plan. One example is that when you take a look at, say, an organization's mission statement, and their mission statement is that customer service is the top priority. Well, a real estate organization usually takes their mission within the department and their annual goals and objectives and target customer satisfaction within the organization as a key objective. Certainly the theory is that if the internal organization is successful in delivering customer service, superior customer service to their clients, that's partly supported by the real estate organization, allowing the organization to focus on delivery of the service to their customer. You take a look at the department's operational plan, and again, what the goals and objectives are. Very importantly, we use the acronym here, SMART. SMART KPIs and metrics are S for specific. KPIs need to be clear and focused towards performance targets. The M is for measurable. KPIs can be expressed quantitatively and they can be easily measured. Most importantly, they have to be reasonable and attainable, the A. Realistic, the KPI is directly related to what's being measured. And lastly, the T is for time-based. The KPI can be measured in a very specific time frame. So when you take a look at the slide that I have up right now, these are just some examples of specific metrics. They may not always apply to every organization, but metrics are really nothing more than pieces of extracted data. It's cost data, it's quality data, it's temperature data, corrective maintenance data, energy usage. All of that is extrapolated and measured and brought up so that management and the organization can, determine how they're performing. So if we go back to the previous slide and think about what's important to the organization, and again, I'll use the customer service expectation. Is our service delivery timely? Is the quality there? Does customer satisfaction information support that? Are there any exceptions? Maybe you work in a financial institution, and the financial institution, we all know, is their focus is primarily on cost data and the timeliness of delivery, variance reporting, measuring month-to-month accuracy to the budget. What is some of the creativity or the new ways we're looking at saving money? And then certainly operationally, infrastructure performance. We need to minimize our downtime. If you have data centers or any of the computer environments, that's usually one of the key areas that we focus on. And interestingly, one of mine in the industry that I have preached for a good part of my life was improve proactivity. And essentially, to me, what this means is that an organization, if you were self-generating work orders, and our goal as a facilities organization is always to improve the ability of our customer to do their job. So rather than having a customer having to sit down and put in a work order or call a work order in, what I always like to try to measure is what is the proactiveness of the workforce, and how do they go out and proactively find the issues before our customers do. And certainly today, this is becoming somewhat easier with smart building technology. Recently seen a lot of examples where we get notified in advance of a problem, which is where the industry is now going. So you really have to prioritize these based on the alignment with your goals and objectives. You need to implement, measure, and monitor, but most importantly, manage the portfolio using the information to improve your overall performance of your assets and your team. So when we start taking a look at this, we take a look at strategic alignment and where to start. As I've alluded to in the start of the presentation, we need to take a look at where our organization is, what's important to them. What we do here is we essentially have what we call the 5 essential KPIs for facility management. In general, what I normally would do when I go to a customer is I would recommend placing all of your metrics and KPIs into one of the five following categories. Certainly, we all know financial. Regardless if we're in work for a financial institution or whatever, we always have a focus on our budget. Are we performing month to month? Did we accurately forecast our ability to perform within this, within our given budget on a particular fiscal year? And secondly, we take a look at the capital requirements or the new money requirements. Did we accurately forecast what the needs would be for replacement to ensure that our portfolio operates optimally? And of course, all of us know operational. We have to be able to measure the work orders. We've touched on the proactive work orders. And another key area is inspection and rounds. Part of being proactive is being out there and conducting inspections. We did a session a few months ago about repeat blindness and how we need to constantly be able to keep those deficiencies that we define on the forefront of the burner so that they're identified in our regular operating plans and are addressed and corrected, whether in this fiscal cycle or the next. Third area that we use is called value add. This is an area that takes a look at what is the organization doing to proactively help raise the bar, increase the department or the organization's contribution to success. Some of the items in here might be cost reduction items, process improvements, and in many cases, technology enhancements. What are we bringing to the table to improve our team's ability to deliver on technology and improve productivity? Strategic is the fourth category that we target, and some of these areas are how do we reduce our carbon footprint? How are we implementing green initiatives? Certainly, with the competition today for talent, green initiatives become a very important component. Best practices. How do we implement best practices? And lastly, our area is customer satisfaction. I think we're all aware of that. I think the one caution I would give here is I've seen a lot of times where customer satisfaction, clients want to have every single solitary work order analyzed for customer satisfaction. I normally recommend that that's not a good idea. I target usually two areas. Take a random sample of 20% of the work orders that were conducted in a particular month, and then on an annualized basis, you take a look at who your customers are, and you send out a general customer sat survey to a certain percentage of those key customers again. So again, you have to focus on what your desired outcomes are. Those desired outcomes are what are going to help you target those areas for implementation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move on to some examples. These are static examples. So these were screenshots of actual customer information that we've taken here at Aware Manager, and give you some examples of how you can use that information. So if you think about the 5 areas I just went through, and I'll read them again. They're financial, operational, value add, strategic, and customer satisfaction. What I've tried to do here is take examples in some of those areas to use. So if this was online and it was active, what you would see here, this particular slide shows average cost per work order by site by trade. And what you do with this information, and I assume I'm speaking to a group of professionals so that you know what the information is used for, but it clearly states that down at the bottom, these are the different locations. This is the average cost of the work order. And from here, it helps you take a look within each one of these locations and compare the locations to those particular sub-areas. So, you take a look at Burlington, you see this light gray at $236.19 per work order. That seems high compared to some of the other ones. And again, it's the information, it's how you use the information and how it allows you to dig and continue to take a look at ways to improve. Now this one here I picked because I like colors. So this is actually a pretty neat graph. And again, this is a static example, but in real life use, what you do on this particular one is I can go in and hit each one of the colors here, and the colors would normally pop up and they would give me more detailed information that I could look at. What we do is we drill down. It'll take me from this overall view, and I can drill down all the way down to a work order to see what some of the detail is. And what I always try to preach to anyone in the industry is that, from my perspective, it's not the specific work order where you start. You need to take a look at the trends month over month. What's changing? Is the average work order for a particular location, if it ran consistently at $10 per work order per month, and all of a sudden in the 5th month it's at $17 a work order? That's just a red flag to me that I want to check and drill down to. Now the next example is an operational example, and this is backlog. backlog is defined by all of us on the phone differently, my guess is, but Tommy's definition of backlog is very simply this. Within a particular month, whatever the priority of a work order was defined for being due that month is what was due, and that carries over and should have been completed, or in some cases was just carried over to the month, is backlog. And again, what you're looking for is trends, and as you can see here, trends tend to go up in certain places, and again, what you're trying to do is take a look and manage those trends and understand what the information is telling you. Next one is another one of my pretty ones that I like, and again, this particular, I mean, we all kind of like go to what we're comfortable with. The last example being an area and bar chart. Those to me are not as if you will, creative as these newer ones are, where I can see all of the information in a circular format and I can drill down. And again, this gives me a couple of areas that I would take a look at and start to drill down. And normally, if this was active, I would hit that outside large greenish color one, and it would give me a lot of much more detailed data. So on this one here, it's pretty hard to come up with metrics that are, if you will, value add, you know, in a general format. Usually what you have to do when you take a look at value add, you have to take a look at what's important to your organization and what are some of the items that are built into, you know, to their business plan or their operating plan. So as an example, when I was with Philips, and being a Dutch company and European, they're very, very focused on green, carbon footprint reduction. They're very environmentally focused, very, very different than we are here in the U.S. And in that example, what you'll find is that that would be a key area that you could take a look at the organization's value add, either through, as you see here, energy consumption, heating system upgrades, all of those items that are going to be very specific to your company or your organization. Value add and strategic are less generic than operational, financial, and customer service, but they can be measured easily, but you have to take the time to interact with your organization to extract that data. And here's a strategic example, just taking a look at the generation of work orders, where some of them come from, and taking a look at what you would use this information for is taking a look at some of it to understand how you might be able to, you know, change the distribution of where work orders come from. And I'll give you a very specific example. I was on an account once where this particular account had a call center involved where work orders came in. And work orders could come in one of three fashions. One was a direct call into the call center, one was faxed, and one was by email. And the rate that was charged by the company that I work for to this client varied depending on the type of work, how the work order came in. So as an example, we'll say that a call-in cost $2, a fax coming in was $1.25, but an email was 50 cents. So what one of the strategic initiatives that we always had was to go out and you know, talk with our customers, get them to understand that the cost could be reduced significantly to the organization if they started using email, because it was far less labor intensive to the organization to deliver that. So that's kind of a creative way of finding a way to implement a strategic example. Next, customer satisfaction. I'm not going to go into detail on this because I suspect everyone on the phone measures customer satisfaction. We all know that it can be very you know, difficult to get people to participate. Number one, it's very difficult to design the right questions that will get answered and help the organization improve. I usually like to focus on no more than 5, and again, as I said earlier, I would always take and randomly survey normally 20% of the total work orders that were completed during a month for the customer's satisfaction on that particular work order. And secondly, I would go back on an annualized basis and generate some type of customer satisfaction survey that took a look with the overall satisfaction the organization had with the department. So when we think about that, when we go back to the 5 areas that we discussed, these are items you should consider if you're building a dashboard or how you take a look at them. Again, I preach these, have for most of my life: financial, operational, customer satisfaction, strategic, and value add. And with that, I will turn it back to Courtney. And thank you again for attending.
Thanks, Tommy. We have a few questions that have come in so far. One of the questions was that you had mentioned, different analytics tools out there that help predict failure. Can you describe what some of those are and how you would use them?
Sure. So certainly the technology today has advanced significantly over the last 5 years. We look at ways to, especially on a preventative maintenance area, to take a look at there's vibration analysis. We try to determine if there is, unusual vibration in a particular motor or piece of equipment. We take a look at the run rate, if you will. If you are able to accumulate a good amount of information from your work orders, you should be able to determine a failure frequency for a particular piece of equipment. I have found in some cases, if you've got like a 5-year history, you may find that a useful life of a piece of equipment that's deemed to be 15 years, it may be performing so well that there's been no maintenance, no failures on it have been done or happened over a 5-year period, and maybe you can extend that one out. Versus there could be a piece exactly the same type of equipment that's only 11 years old that's had a significant failure rate, and you may want to consider obviously keeping the one that's scheduled to be replaced versus that. And what I have seen now with the smart building technology, if that's targeted where part of the question is, we've seen light bulbs that have the ability to notify a call center or a technician or a web link about a failure. I've even seen some ongoing technology relative to temperature control, how they can be proactively monitor and actually manage it without human intervention. And certainly paper products are another area. If you're in an environment where there's heavy usage and your cleaning staff is on a regular schedule to check the restroom or a break area, you may find that in one particular case, this particular break area needs to be addressed much more frequently, and you can get that by some of the new technology of that notifying you when it happens.
Another question, Tommy, is how do these metrics work, for example, when you're in a building and a tenant is actually responsible for some of the maintenance in their own space? How do you combine that, for example, with maybe the base building's information?
Well, that would be dependent on is the tenant space on the same system as the base building. But in most cases, you would have to run, or what I would do is I would run the tenant space somewhat separately. Their goals and objectives could be radically different from the base building. We know the base building owner is probably trying to reduce cost all the time, and their goals and objectives could be financial, where within the space of a tenant, especially if it's a high-tech firm or some of these capital investment firms, their goal is going to be employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction. So you kind of may have to work with two sets of data in those particular examples, because you could be in a high-rise and that high-rise has, we'll say it's got 40 floors, and of the 40 floors, 30 of them are on the base building system, but the other 10 are on 3 different systems and have different goals and objectives. So that becomes kind of a balancing act.
And I think we have time for one quick last question. Tommy, could you just go back to slide 8 and just explain what the metric you were showing there? A couple of people had asked about that.
Sure. So let me get my sheet out here too. So in this particular one here, what we're looking at is this particular one shows the average cost of the top 10 work orders. And as you can see on the side here, you take electric after hours as an example. If you were to, that one there in blue, so it shows that that's the one. If I hit this one here in real life, that would pop up and tell me what the makeup was of that particular after hours electric at Bedford. In the next example, or 2 examples further down in the electric equipment install, you've actually got 4 data points here to actually drill down on. And if I were to go in here and had the ability to do that, we can actually drill down and see that. What I could suggest for those asking about that, we could set up a contact point afterwards and show a real live example of how that works and how you can drill down.
Great, thank you, Tommy, and thank you everyone for joining us today. If you have any questions after this, we'll be sending out the presentation and a link to the hard slides probably either later today or first thing tomorrow morning, so keep a lookout for that. And if there's anything else that we can help answer, please let us know. But thank you again for joining us today, and have a good rest of your day.